Given the overall trajectory of the franchise, it's easy to forget that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is actually, at its core, a horror series. So today, I wanted to take a moment to talk a bit about some of my favorite, horrifying Yu-Gi-Oh! Monster card designs. I'm largely going to focus on how the monster is designed, more so than the lore or its role in the overall series, but where relevant, I may consider that as well. These aren't ordered in any particular way, nor have I picked a pretty number of monsters. I more so found a couple that I thought were interesting and worth talking about while scrolling through an art book for monsters from the first series. So with that out of the way, the first monster I'd like to talk about is Lord Poison. Now when you look at this design, one thing that jumps out immediately is the extreme level of detail in the skin folds. It has this very natural, organic look about it with the way the veins kind of stretch across the whole body. More creepily is the skin folds themselves, the little wrinkles that appear across the design and seem to kind of get flabbier the more we get towards the center of the monster. It's really interesting because at this point in time, a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! Monsters were kind of more abstract looking, a little more flat, and were lacking in kind of this level of detail. But here, when you look at the way the shadows fall, the way that the skin flaps fold upon one another, that extreme level of detail helps communicate this fleshy texture, perhaps better than a lot of other artwork at this time. Another prominent feature of this design is the massive claw-like protrusions that appear across the entire body. There's something about how irregular they are, how sharp they are, and how disproportionate they are to the body that really sends shivers down my spine. Some of the spikes in the middle even kind of have a worm-like aesthetic that gives the impression of tentacles or something digging into this really fleshy texture. Ugh. And then the absolute cherry on top is this gross worm-like mouth that's on its head with just a couple of really sharp teeth. The second monster I'd like to highlight is Wicked Worm Beast. Immediately, there's a pretty stark contrast between this and Lord Poison. There's less details with respect to the texture of the skin. It's a little more cartoonish. But what really sets this apart from maybe some of the other monsters on this list is the concept of the design. It truly looks as if this worm has infested some sort of creature and is slowly eating away at the body. The different ways in which this worm manifests are increasingly creepy. On the one hand, we have something maybe a little more straightforward with it kind of jumping out of its chest and wrapping around its neck and laying upon its shoulder. But then there's more creepy instances such as parts of the fingers seemingly turning into worms or the way little worm-like creatures are jumping in and out of the bicep. Even if it lacks the level of detail as a Lord Poison, the choice of pink for the worm still communicates the same fleshy texture as the details in Lord Poison. The next monster on this list is Thousand Eyes Idol, our resident trypophobia trigger. I debated putting Thousand Eyed Restrict here because I do think that design is overall a little creepier. However, there's something about the eyes in Thousand Eyes Idol that just feel a little colder. Some of these eyes are staring with a level of intensity that wasn't present in Thousand Eyes Restrict. The subtle wrinkles around the eyes farther emphasize that crazed look that I think was missing in Thousand Eyes Restrict. But what I think is really interesting about this design is it is an otherwise cartoony character. I mean, you look at his little party hat and cape, big gloves and cartoonishly small arms and legs, but then you get this oddly textured green flesh. Just look at the way it starts to fold around the left leg. This almost TV static looking flesh together with some of those wrinkles on an otherwise normal cartoony character, that juxtaposition elicits some kind of reaction from me, far stronger than Thousand Eyes Restrict. Now this next monster might be somewhat of a surprise and arguably not that scary at all, but I've decided to choose Island Turtle. I know, for some perhaps a cute pet turtle, what could possibly be scary about this design? Well, look at its fucking head. There's something about the way the head is straining out of the water, right? You can kind of see the tension lines just under its chin there. That and its bulging yellow eye. There's something rabid looking about this thing. If it bites you, it's over for you. No ER could save you. I mean, just look at those few small but extremely sharp teeth. I mean, you just know that thing can bite a massive piece of flesh out of you. And perhaps it's also leaning into this kind of megalophobia, because after all, it is an island turtle. And for any of us that have watched, I believe, Capsule Monsters, you'll remember just how big this thing is. I mean, as the name suggests, it is an island turtle. Next, I'm going to talk about Giant Axe Mummy, Again, similar to Lord Poison, there's just an uncanny amount of detail in this creature's design. The first thing that jumps out to me are the bandages. All the intricate line work communicates the different creases and folds and wrinkles within them, indicating that they've probably been on this person for a long time. But beyond that, the way that the bandages layer one another and the way the shadows communicate that depth is really something you don't see in a lot of early Yu-Gi-Oh art. But the real unsung hero of the bandages is the color scheme. That off-white really communicates the age of the bandages, and that with one wrong step they are ready to crumble off. And in fact, at certain parts of the design, we could see pieces kind of being ripped off and chipped away at. And speaking of chipped away, just look at how they've left the chest cavity open. Like I've mentioned with previous entries, it's a combination of the pink that they've chosen, but also the way the skin kind of folds upon itself, and the way the shadows once again communicate that depth. It's got this warm, fleshy texture that is super visceral. And then finally we have the face where he's basically missing his jaw and his right eyeball. Taken together, this is one scary dude. And the last monster I'd like to talk about today is Dark Gearpod. And there are a plethora of things that are off-putting with this design. I mean, for one, just look at all the random limbs and appendages. They almost don't seem to conform to our understanding of natural anatomy. The way they contort the body is really unsettling. But perhaps some of the most unsettling aspects are the almost human-like feet and hands on the bottom. Just seeing these attached to an otherwise alien-looking design really sends shivers down your spine. But then we have this face screaming in agony in the center of the torso, right under this strangely vanuous, glowing, dare I say, pus sack. The way all the veins kind of concentrate around this part of the design, with the face, screaming out, the multiple eyeballs that are off-centered, it all comes together to really communicate something eerie and unsettling. And that about wraps up what I wanted to talk about today. I'm sure if I spent a bit more time on the topic, I could have came up with 4 more monsters and gave this a much more convenient title, but I thought, why force myself to talk about more monsters and repeat the same talking points when I can just go over these 6 and talk about some of the key design elements that really create that unsettling vibe. But that's all for now. If you like this kind of informal style video, please let me know, as I do plan on doing more things like this in the future. Anyways, my name is Doovie. Don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe. Until next time, stay spooky.